Good evening and welcome to the August 31st edition of the Gold, Goats, and Guns Hour here on YouTube and Periscope. My name is Tom Luongo. Get right to it. Heck of a week. Keep saying it over and over again. Heck of a week. Wow. So, got a lot to talk about tonight, especially what's happened in financial markets this afternoon, today, and the last couple of days. If you haven't been following it, which most of you probably haven't, but we're seeing an acceleration of the collapse of emerging market currencies. It's not just basket cases like Venezuela or geopolitically challenged or challenging situations like Turkey. Now it's Argentina and Brazil. It's Malaysia to a lesser extent. Quietly, the Russian ruble has pushed down about 18 or 19%. It's not just Iran, countries that are under serious sanctions threat from Donald Trump. We're now just talking about countries that are in serious trouble. And this has everything to do with what's happening behind the scenes in markets, in the big offshore dollar markets, otherwise known as the euro dollar markets. And again, not getting anything from Restream. Quite annoying. So there it is. All right. Better, because the other Restream chat doesn't work. All right, let's try that one. So it's really interesting what's happening here, and I'm sorry for the delay. I'm just trying to make sure I get everything working technically. It's fascinating to watch this, and the Eurodollar markets have been under serious pressure all year, or not all year, but since May at a minimum, and longer, and even back into April. And when those markets are drained of liquidity, that's real institutional money scared about deflation, scared about the global economy. And while we sit here and we talk about this and we say, well, you know, the global economy is booming, right? The U.S. economy is pumping along at 4% nominally, and China's growth is still supposedly solid, and all of these things are supposed to be so good. Well, if everything's so good, why are the markets acting the way? Why is the German stock market treading water? Why is the Chinese stock market under pressure? Why are Italian bond yields blowing out to the upside? Why is the Argentinian peso literally collapsing? The central bank raised interest rates to 60% the other day. You've got no dollar reserves. You've got no, not just that you don't have any dollar reserves, as Jeff Snyder at Alhambra Capital pointed out the other day, high dollar reserves are a synthetic short position against the dollar, because you're going to sell them in order to defend your currency. They're a symptom of a bigger problem. So, symptom of a deeper problem. Yeah, I'm not getting anything through Restream, by the way. Somebody would like throw a couple of comments up just so I can know that I'm not speaking into a vacuum. I want to see if Restream is actually working properly. That would be great. Because those of you on Periscope, I'm not seeing. If you're commenting, I'm not seeing it. I don't know what's going on. So and I know I'm early tonight, but I decided I wanted to get on. So I'm really, everything I've been talking about for a long time now is, yeah. Oh, there we are. Cool. Okay, great. We got something coming through from Periscope. Great. Thank you. Everything I've been talking about happening for a while now is finally starting to come to fruition. We're finally starting to see all of these things take place. And not that this is good, because it's not, right? But at the end of the day, these corrections are going to happen. Yeah, I can see comments now, guys, so that's great. Thank you. So, you know, it's one thing when you have a country like Turkey who's invoked the ire of the United States with its geopolitical maneuvers, right? One thing when it's Iran who's under serious sanctions threat. It's one thing when it's Russia who continues to be shut, you know, farther and farther out of dollar funding markets. It's another thing when it's Argentina and it's Brazil and it's South Africa. And there's no belligerence going on there. There's no geopolitical import there, not of any extreme or immediate nature. What it means is that these are all secondary and tertiary effects of the fundamental change in monetary policy emanating from the Fed, raising interest rates and shrinking its balance sheet, and what that means for, and how the big institutional money is handicapping what that means. And there's very little that the Fed can do at this point to stop this. There's very little that the ECB can't even hold Italian bond yields together, no less anything else. So they've got a bigger, their problem is beginning to escalate out of control. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about in the Italian bond markets in a couple of minutes. I'm going to throw up the chart of the Italian 5-year bond. Actually, prepping that now, so don't. But I want to show you that chart, just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, and the fact that I think that yield curve is flattening on top of everything else. Also interesting. I'm going to show you the 10-year is actually. So yeah, we'll just look at the 10-year. The 5-year is interesting as well, and the 2-year looks ugly. It all looks bad, right? The whole Italian yield curve looks terrible. I mean, so the markets are handicapping that this is going to get worse before it gets better. It's going to get uglier before we come out the other side of it, and that normalcy is not going to be normalcy is not going to be retained simply because we went through a little bit of an adjustment period, and then it's going to swing back in the other direction. Where we're beginning to get well beyond 1 sigma, 2 sigma moves in these markets. We're beginning to get into the kind of feedback loops that create catastrophes. We're coming into Labor Day weekend, and this is the period of time when the markets start. If there's going to be a crash or there's going to be a crisis, it always happens around this time of the year. And there's a couple of reasons for that historically. Part of it is simply that everybody goes back to their trading desks after Labor Day because all the kids go back to school. Summer vacations are over, and things that and trading desks, you know, get fully staffed again, and all that stuff. And guys start really paying attention as to what's going on. We're now solidly into Q3. They're starting to gear up for what they're going to do for end of the year positioning, and are they going to have to sell for taxes, and how they're going to rebalance their portfolios. There's a lot of that goes on. It's just all of a sudden, it's when after Labor Day, everybody gets back to work and starts really paying attention to what's happening in the markets. And that's when they look at what's happened over the summer and went, yeah, I need to sell that. I need to buy more of that. I need to sell some of that. And it was interesting to me today. and I'll talk about this in more detail on Sunday for my subscribers and my Patreon subscribers, where I'm going to go over things in detail, because we had our month, because today was the last day of August, so this is monthly closing prices, so now we'll have real data. But I want you to be aware that we haven't even really begun to see emerging market pain, right? And the dollar hasn't moved very much. The U.S. trade weighted index the dollar index hasn't moved very much. And yet, we're getting this massive draining of emerging market capital. That should scare you. Because when things really start to fly, things really start to accelerate, you'll see bond yields moving, half a point a day. And all of a sudden, you'll see gold jump $50. We've seen it in the past. See it again. So, most of my opening remarks for this evening, I wanted you guys to be aware of this. We had the NAFTA talks between the U.S. and Canada today, which kind of first spooked and then didn't spook markets, and obvious controversy with people leaking Trump's off the record remarks. But eventually, Canada's going to cut a deal. They have to. They don't have a choice. But interesting, and I want to go over what's happened in the last couple of days. And the next thing I want to talk about, and then I'll open it up to questions, is back in July, Donald Trump tweeted out saying an ultimatum or a challenge to the European Union, saying, "Hey, let's have free trade." Yeah, not much, mostly. So let's have free trade. Let's get rid of all the tariffs and all the protectionism and everything else. Let's get rid of all of that. I'm making that offer to them now. If you do it, we'll do it. They won't do it. That's not what they want. Something on it. Then yesterday, the Germans turn around and say, "Hey, let's scrap all automobile tariffs." I wrote a blog post about it yesterday. There's a link to it in the description of the video down below. And Trump immediately turned around and goes, "Not good enough." Because, not good enough. Your consumer culture doesn't want to buy our cars. Yeah, Don, that's because our cars suck. Honestly, at the end of the day, everybody's going to be buying Korean cars because they're the best on the market right now. So much car for the money. But so yeah, it's just really it's funny. And so Trump lays down this ultimatum and then gets his bluff called, and then he has to back up into the corner. I'm like, why are you doing this? And of course, the obvious thing is that he doesn't want trade peace with the European Union. I really do believe that Donald Trump looking to break the back of the European Union in so many different ways and drive them away so that he can withdraw from NATO. He can open up he can continue to force the dialogue open that NATO is unnecessary and an extravagant expense that we don't need to be paying for, that the Europeans should just pay for their own defense. And both German Chancellor Angela Merkel and French President Emmanuel Macron have talked about in the same terms, saying we can no longer rely on the United States for security issues. This is your big virtue signal that they are ready to end this arrangement, because they know that Trump is not going to honor it anyway, and they want to have their own grand army of the EU anyway, right? So, I just find all this really funny, and it just seems to me like Trump is going to keep beating everybody over the head until the post-World War II institutional order is literally grounded to dirt. I just think that's what he wants. And then he threatens to like leave the WTO like 2 hours later. I gotta tell you, as a libertarian, I love this guy. So every once in a while, he does shit so ballsy and so, I don't know, obnoxious. Just makes me smile. I mean, it really does. I mean, when he said, I'm just going to get rid of the WTO. What's it going to pull out of the WTO? They don't give us anything anyway. I'm like, okay. We don't need managed trade. But at the same time, Trump doesn't want free trade either. So, I mean, when he does shit like that, I'm like, that's great. But I know you don't want free trade, Don. You want the same kind of managed trade that everybody else wants. You just want the advantages from the management going to us as opposed to them. And as I've said before, on top of all of that, Trump's got this outmoded view of how freaking international trade works anyway, which drives me crazy. And I'm like, man, we export debt and get goods in return. We have a pretty good deal going. Okay? And then when, we don't like the way the world works, the way the world is arrayed around us, all we got to do is pull back on dollar liquidity and bankrupt everybody. I don't see how that's bad. Ultimately, I mean, I know what Trump is saying, and I know what he thinks he's trying to do, which is he wants to bring he wants to change the way the economy functions, that you take some of the money out of the financialization of all of this and bring it back to sustainable, tangible production. I know that's what he's trying to do, but I don't know that he'll achieve it at this point. All right, I'm done with that stuff. I'm gonna throw it open for questions. I'm gonna go back over a couple of your comments and we'll go from there. So, Jen Johnson, you didn't miss much. I was talking like Italian bond yields. I'm gonna throw up a chart in a couple minutes. RB Tools. I don't know, Tom. I'm losing faith in Trump. If he bombs Syria again, he officially becomes just another one in a long line of war criminals occupying the White House. I honestly don't think that he's in charge of a lot of this stuff at this point. RB Tools. As a matter of fact, I just got finished reading Justin Raimondo's latest article, and that's something I should. It was on Zero Hedge, and talking about the cancellation of Mike Pompeo's trip to North Korea. That Josh Rogan, who's a partisan neocon operative, might as well be John McCain's freaking dick holder. Let everybody know what's actually going on with that cancellation, which is we're not happy with the way the North Koreans are denuclearizing. Bullshit. That's John Bolton speak. We don't know what's going on, but we can tell you one thing. And the great thing about Raimondo's article is like he spends like the first half of it setting up the point, which is that we know what the North Koreans are thinking, which is that the North Koreans don't think that Trump's in charge of his own White House at this point. So, and they're not going to be willing to do anything at all until they know they can get that the United States is, one, capable, if not willing, to honor its deal. So they're not going to take any tangible steps at this point. All the goodwill has been expended. All the moves that North Korea made earlier and Trump in return made. Those were all moments of goodwill. Now we have to get down to brass tacks. So yeah, that's what's going on there. And I would be remiss if I did not cover the assassination of Alexander Zakharchenko today in the Donbass by Kiev. Well, we don't know that it was Kiev, but it was either Kiev or it was Blackwater on Kiev's half, or it was the CIA, or it was somebody else. And So this is a major provocation that Putin will not respond to again. The hardliners in Russia will call for his head. All 5 of them. Well, all 5% of them. And this will go on. North on 60. It looks like Pompeo and Bolton are trying to start 2 wars. Obviously, Ukraine by assassinating Zakharchenko today, and in Syria. Yeah, it does look that way, doesn't it? It could also be a big pantomime in Syria. Situation with North Korea, with Syria, is that as the Idlib operation to wipe up and clean up Idlib is about to start, the Russians have sent to the UN and the OSCE and the Office for the Promulgation of Chemical Weapons, the OCPW, sorry. That the Russians sent information to everybody, according to them, incontrovertible proof that that MI6 through the white helmets was ready to stage another false flag chemical weapons attack, including kidnapping a whole bunch of Syrian children. Now, I don't know about that part of it, but I certainly don't discount the rest of it. I also like the fact that the Russians are finally naming that it's MI6 doing all of this, which is very important because they're the ones behind 90% of this crap, between them and the Mossad. So never underestimate the power of people who don't want peace. And that's what was interesting about the North Korean commentary that Romando linked to, was that they kept saying over and over again that Trump is doing this on his own. All the peace initiative, all the peace impetus coming from Trump. It's coming from nobody else within the administration. A man on an island. Both Thordum and Draga bring up points about South Korea, and I think that the hope for and I've been saying, as you guys know, for a long time, I've been saying that not the South Koreans, but the Koreans have been driving this peace initiative bus, right? They're the ones that want it, and they're the ones that ultimately are going to get what they want, regardless of what John Bolton wants. John Bolton is doing his level best. I'm convinced that Bolton is part of this. That he's the one doing most of the sincere sabotaging of all. And it's a real shame. But as far as I understand, there's going to be a summit between the South and North Koreans in early September to start hammering out more details on reunification. That's an unqualified good thing. They're moving forward with or without the U.S., and I think that that's exactly what they need. They need to continue to put the pressure on the United States to not look like the ones trying to stop a peace deal. And every time they talk and they come to more agreements, the more it just looks like the U.S. is being obstructionist over nothing. And what's really sad here is that the American people don't want war. They want this over and done with, and our government just refuses to listen to them. And the oligarchs behind them won't listen. WDM. If you were Kim Jong-un, would you sign a deal with the U.S. after Iraq, Ukraine, Libya, Iran, etc.? U.S. wants to promise you something and then bomb you into dust for alleging you broke the agreement. I know that. You know that. I know this because Tyler knows this. Of course, we all know this. We are not agreement capable. This is the fundamental problem, and this is part of the reason why I think that nothing good is going to happen out of the American foreign policy front until after the midterm elections. And Ramondo's really, I think, what he was right when he said, look, the letter that was sent canceling Pompeo's trip was more likely a statement of, there's nothing we can do until after the midterms. So there's no point in Mike coming over and visiting. Do you think after this that Kim and Moon will reconsider and come to Vladivostok this fall during the Eastern Economic Forum to signal to the U.S. that they won't give up on the peace process? That's a really good question, Thordum. And I hope it's true. I hope that you're right. Or I hope that what you're implying that they would do what you're implying. That's a great. Because if they do that, then they're making it abundantly clear to everybody that their economic well-being and economic future will not be derailed by a bunch of neocon dead-enders in the Trump administration that refuse to go away. Good morning, Arjun. How are you? So then we get now back down to the big question of, now we go right back to where we've been talking over and over again about the midterm elections. What happened midterms. And I know everybody wants to believe the polls because it's the best thing, the only thing we've got. And I'm still of the opinion that the pollsters are doing everything they can to, they're doing everything they can to gaslight people into not showing up at for the November election and everything else, and that they're really hoping that what they saw in Florida for record voter turnout from Democrats for a primary, a gubernatorial primary, is going to translate into into statewide energy, and I just don't think so. I really do think that the midterm elections are going to be the end of the Democratic Party. I just do. I mean, no one will admit it, but I think that it's going to be bad for them. And if they go the way I think they're going to go, I mean, guys, they got me out on primary election day to vote in the frickin' gubernatorial race and Senate race here in Florida. Okay? Because I'm registered Republican. A holdover from when I wanted to vote for Ron Paul. And they got me and Camille out there on Tuesday voting for. And I didn't vote on everything. I voted only for the races I knew something about, and I voted against a tax increase. County, because I always vote against tax increase. Tax increase for no. So if I went out and voted, I gotta tell you, Trump's base is fired up. Just is. So I'm not worried about the midterm. They just have to continue to play this game for as long as they can play it, up until the moment the election comes. Should the elections happen, and then the next day everybody goes, "How did that happen? The polls had it up by 10 points. I don't understand. How did that happen? Must be right." And then what they'll do is they'll say it must have been the Russians. Must have been voter fraud, even though they've been categorically telling people there's no voter fraud in the United States. Talk to any lib. They all say the same thing. You bring up voter fraud, they're like, come on. Come on, man. Of course there's voter fraud. You're going to tell me that there's not voter fraud in the United States? Like that there's not one ballot that's been spoiled? I mean, what's your definition? My definition is, this is the fun part. This is where, and then the fun part. So I'm going to relay to you a 2.5 hour conversation I had the other night with a with a stone cold moron who thinks he's really smart. I hate those. So I'm going to give you a perfect example of what I think is what people, the stories that people want to tell themselves. Oh, by the way, I think this is a new high for concurrent people watching this stream on YouTube. 9 people. Pat yourselves on the back, break your hands. I don't care, whatever. Do, but it's all good. So, what I think is going on here. Oh, now we're down to 20. I praise you, and then you leave me. Okay, so the wound me. So what I think is happening here is that the Democrats are fired up in districts that they're going to already win. So they're going to win bigger. In a place like Florida, Trump's people are going to show up in waves. You saw I don't know if you guys saw the pictures from last night's rally in Indiana. You can do about it. But what's fascinating is if you sit down and you actually talk to people. So I was talking to this guy the other night, and I've had the same conversation with my good, with a good friend of mine. Exact same conversation about Russian elections and, you know, and elections, foreign elections. I say, we were talking about, he's of Ukrainian descent, so he was completely questioning the everything, every election in Crimea and in Russia. That's it's just they're corrupt. They don't mean anything. I'm like, okay, well, what's your level of corruption? This is the part. This is the fun part. I'm gonna play Jordan Peterson for me. So, what do you And if you bring up the fact that, look, you say there's no. In a previous conversation, you told me that there was no voter fraud here in the United States. And I just looked at him and said, of course there is. You don't think that there are corrupt supervisors of elections in rural counties and in places that are hand counted? You don't think that happens? But you'll point to a YouTube of people throwing votes away in a Russian polling station and calling that systemic voter fraud. Those two things don't equate. I assume every election has about a half to 1% error overall. So if the margin of error is less than 0.5%, the thing really could have gone either way, because I'm sure that there's just between human error, right, incompetence, mechanical failure, or electronic hinkiness, all of it, and honest to God, everyday freaking corruption. Every election has probably got at least half a point, if not a full point's worth of slop in it, for lack of a better. So, okay, so if that's an American system, that's the American system that you say to me is not corrupt, right? That's your definition. That's my definition of an uncorrupted election. That's just the normal spectrum of behavior of people involved in the election. Right? So I say it's about 0.5%. Anything more than that, I consider to be systemic corruption. It was planned and paid for either through bussing people in or stuffing electronic voting machines with fake postal ballots, to 144% voter registration relative to the actual population of Los Angeles County. I consider that to be voter fraud, because I consider the fact that there's 73 people in the state of Florida that are 100 on the voter rolls that are 116 years or older, and the oldest recorded human to ever lived is 115. So it's insane, right? Listening to these people talk. I'm like, so, you know, my question back to them is that, so tell me what you consider to be a corrupt election, because here's the gig. If it's around, if we're not corruptible between 1.5% and 1%, then would you say that if the Russian elections were horribly corrupt, that the numbers would be off by 5%, 12%? What's the number? Give me a number. What constitutes horribly corrupt to you? Okay, so if it's 10%, great. Then only 8.5 out of 85 out of 100 Crimeans voted for reunification with Russia. And only 65% of Russians voted for Vladimir Putin. The outcomes of these referendum were not going to change. So all of your bullshit is moot. Thorium reminds us that the Ukrainian diaspora here in North America mostly consists of World War II Ukrainians who were fighting for Nazis. They hate Russians and always will. North on 60. Thorium, I'm a Canadian, and the Ukrainian diaspora here are privately trafficking weapons from here to the Azov battalion and right sector, etc. They are the most extreme, mouthy, and violent bunch. Now, this guy, this guy's the guy I was talking to the other day was a freaking lib. So he's a classic lib who doesn't argue, sounds smarter than he is, and then turns around and gish gallops his way out of every freaking point you try to make to him. And I just kept shutting him off and staying on point, and shutting him up, staying on point until we got to Putin. And then I triggered him, and then he called me insane. I'm like, good, fuck off. I've been tired of talking to you. I don't like you anyway. Great. Maybe he won't come to game night anymore and ruin it. That's actually what I was hoping for. Yeah, I know. He's actually literally trying to tell me, well, I'm Ukrainian and I've talked to Crimeans and they're treated like less than dirt now. I'm like, really? That's terrible over there. I'm like, really? Then why are they building statues to the Russian soldiers? Why were there no shots fired? Why did Russian Cossacks cross the Kerch Strait and enter Crimea to fight at the border, to stop the Ukrainians coming across the border to wipe out and ethnically cleanse all the Russians in Crimea? What's a gish gallop? A gish gallop is when you make a point at somebody about a certain thing, and then they immediately turn around and then shift to a different point that's somewhat related without ever conceding that you made your point originally. So have them watch Ukraine on fire. Yeah, have them watch Crimea away home. What I've always said is, look, take the Ukrainian side of it, take the Russian side of it, lop 20% off both sides, meaning that the Ukrainians are probably, 20 or overstating their case by 20%, and then discount Putin's words by 20%, and you probably have something close to the truth. I nailed him to the freaking wall. I said, you do realize that the USS Donald Cook was on its way across the Black Sea until it got radar painted by a Bastion shore defense system, and then immediately went home because American Marines were going to come in and start setting policy after they had secured the Rada. Liz, that's awesome. I don't want to bash on Ukrainians, right? Because I don't. I mean, I've been of the opinion that, I understand that what's happened here in Ukraine, I know that Yanukovych was a son of a bitch. I know that they were upset with him. I know that much of the outpouring on the Maidan was real, but then it was also stoked by outside forces. And what really and it's it's funny how this keeps playing itself out, because I'm like, you understand that everything is not nearly as cut and dried as that. Did not know any of this stuff. Like, I know more about this than you do. Yes, and Crimeans are almost all Russians. That's a fact. And I think his argument was, well, if you're not Russian in Crimea, then you're treated as less than dirt. Well, yeah. Yes, it went from real to Soros-backed agitators. It always does, guys. It's organized. And then when I told them that, look, there is very credible evidence that has been produced that has been independently verified, that the snipers on the rooftops were shooting at both sides to stoke a violent conflict. And all he wanted to do was believe that Yanukovych was killing people on the Maidan. I'm like, it wasn't that way. If that were the case, Yanukovych, if he was a violent dictator, violent dictator, he would have put them down. He would have put the protests down before they ever got out of control. As a matter of fact, Putin even told him. Putin's even said, he's like, I advised him to put these down, and he wouldn't do it. Dave Groth, I know, man. You're preaching to the converted. The Crimeans feared the neo-Nazis coming in and ethnically cleansing them, and they wanted Putin to protect them. I know that. Like, Putin was like, I'm not going to allow, thousands of Russians to. Right, north on 60. The snipers were shooting at both sides. They were Lithuanian and German mercenary and Georgian mercenaries. I know. And so what started as a reasonable and honest outpouring of frustration turned into something much, much uglier than that, and was manipulated into the situation that we have now. Because here's the gig. Yanukovych probably would have been happy would have eventually stepped down from power. The Donbass would have broken away. Crimea would have broken away. We'd have the exact same situation we have now, except that they would have both broken away, and the Donbass would have, and there wouldn't have been the violence if it wasn't done, if it wasn't handled the way it was handled. Or the Donbass would have wanted to break away and then would have with a reasonable government in Kiev, might have gotten, de facto independence. And we wouldn't have what we have today. It's insane what we have today. And it's sad, and it's a massive humanitarian tragedy. Vincere. While complex, I feel our past policies on Ukraine and Syria are just wrong. Both conflicts are more about oil and Western influence than anything else. You are absolutely correct. I hope I pronounced your name properly. And if you want to if you're going to be a regular, throw a phonetic spelling of your first name up so I can get it right in the future. This Russian WTM, the CIA Russian desk was started by Nazi General Reinhard Gehlen and his team, who knew Soviets well and hated Russians. The U.S. intel has always been pro-Nazi. Wow. I know. And I brought this up to him. I'm like, really? The Poroshenko government's better? Well, Poroshenko has a 9% approval rating, and he's going to be deposed from power. As much as they hated Yanukovych, they didn't hate him that much. And moreover, did it need to end that way? No. Did it need to end in violence? No. It ended in violence because we wanted it to end in violence. At that point, he just called me insane and walked off. I was like, good, fuck you. I didn't want to talk to you anyway. I can't stand people. Crazy. But, here I am, a freaking American who's not supposed to know anything and knows more about this shit than he does. Watch Ukraine on fire. I haven't yet. I've been meaning to, Dave, so thank you for reminding me. Thordoom brings up another very important point. This is why I don't think that the Ukrainian conflict is going to last through the next election cycle in Ukraine, because there's going to be elections next summer or next year, early next year. If you want to know who's winning the Ukrainian conflict, then look nowhere else than the 50 dead soldiers who died by alcohol, by poisoned alcohol. The morale of the Ukrainian army is terrible, and desertion is incredible. Yeah, people got burned to death in a building in Odessa. I know User 13 has brought up that incident in Odessa every time we bring up the words Ukraine. RB Tools. I can't see an end to this quagmire that doesn't end in a war between the United States and Russia. I hope I'm wrong. I don't think it's going to end up there. I don't. I think that these guys, what they want ultimately is the status quo to be maintained, where they can continue to sell arms around the world and stoke conflicts in order to sell more weapons. And I think that's what it's all about. The whole thing, I think, is unraveling. And I think what Trump is doing to them is he's running a game of attrition on them the same way that Putin is running a game of attrition. And oh no, North on 60, don't get me wrong. You should bring it up every time. I was working with you. I was supporting the point you were making by reminding everybody that User 13 brings it up all the time, and she's absolutely right too, and you're absolutely right too. Well, we're trying, Dave. Thank you very much. You're putting me in the same orbit as Lucy Commissar and Lee Stranahan. Lee's been good to me. So we had a great talk this morning on fault lines. If you guys didn't see the segment, it was fun. We talked open borders, libertarianism, and all sorts of stuff. What was really cool about that segment, by the way, and I'll get back to Ukraine in a minute, was that I was getting people DMing me on Twitter while I was still on with Lee and Garland. Like, dude, you're fucking killing it this morning. That's awesome. Like, so, yeah, he really is very, very good. If the stream got ugly for a second, I'm not sure what's going on, but YouTube's telling me that I've got no output. I don't have any drop frames on my end, though. Maybe. RB Tools is saying war happens despite the machinations of our central planners. The freaks in DC keep pushing and pushing. Eventually, they will push the caboose off the cliff. Well, the problem is that Putin refuses to Putin refuses to respond to the provocations the way we want him to. We keep trying to come up with ways to get Putin to strike back, and he keeps turning the other cheek, and it's driving them insane because he's seeing the bigger picture. Seeing the bigger picture. Okay, good. Yeah, I don't know what happened. I have 0 drop frames so far tonight. So, on my end. So that means that either Camille or Soapy are interfering with my bandwidth. So something happened with Google and Google's end. Good evening, Archie Bird. How are you? So Dozer asks the $64,000 question, and we've got about 10 minutes before I've got to go. So what will happen with Turkey, Iran, Syria, Russia, and the U.S.? Well, I don't know if I can cover all that in 10 minutes. But let's see what let's see if we can get some of this done. Turkey's going to leave NATO. I think Trump is pushing Turkey to leave NATO. I think Trump is pushing France and Germany to discount the need for NATO, to set the stage for when Turkey decides to leave NATO, that it'll just kind of end. That is big. When Macron comes out, when Emmanuel, I can't believe I butchered his name twice tonight. When Emmanuel Macron comes out and says, we should really recalibrate our relationship and look at a strategic alliance or a strategic relationship with Russia and Turkey. That's big. I think that Putin is not going to respond to any major confrontation or any major provocation over Idlib. He's going to do it on purpose in order to get Idlib cleaned up. That will then put Trump in a position to say, look, ISIS, we've kicked the hell out of ISIS. They're done in Idlib. Everything's done. Let's get out of there now. I think that Heather Nauert is working for the other side, or Nauert or Nywert or whatever, however she says her name, the State Department spokesperson. I think she's working for the other side. Because she went right out and she denied that the United States met and talked with Assad and offered terms for our withdrawal from Syria. The best things you can do is build yourselves, you yourselves build bigger followings, right? So if you're active on Twitter, get more people, get into different groups, find different people. Best thing you can do is to continue to, supporting me is great, and I really do appreciate it, guys. I'm not, I don't mean in any way, manner, shape, or form sound ungrateful, because I don't. But everything you do, if you can multiply yourselves, then you multiply us. So yeah, Heather Nauert is just a blonde Nikki Haley. She's terrible. As a matter of fact, how that woman still has her job as State Department spokesperson after all this time is insane. Now I'm starting to get some drop frames, so it's looking like somebody's getting antsy downstairs and wants me to get off the stream. Yeah, I get them very slowly. Well, then start. The other thing we can do, and is we do actually need to start building up some of these other social media platforms as well. I'm on Minds. I don't use it a lot, but then again, I don't use it a lot for a variety of reasons. And I'm on Gab, and I started using Gab more as well. So, yeah, there's a bit of lag. I'm starting to get a lot of drop frames. So this is probably a good place for me to end, because video output is low for whatever reason. So, probably will not be on Monday night. Need to let you guys go. So